Hey guys, how's it going today? So this is a second upload today. I'm gonna start working on my election night soon. It's just been school's been extremely hectic, and I'm just gonna get these videos out. So I'm doing a Gary Johnson versus President Trump general election prediction as if Gary Johnson ran as a libertarian. Um, a lot of the states that you're gonna see now, they won't be yellow on the map. On the electoral vote count, they'll be yellow, and they'll be yellow when I show them over here, even though they didn't vote libertarian. That's because I've messed with the page a little bit and just I just made the blue turn yellow when you see it up there, but it won't be yellow on the screen. So if you see blue, just consider that to be Gary Johnson states. So this one's going to be a very weird general election prediction. I mean, if you think about it, we have a libertarian candidate who's not necessarily a Democrat, but he's also not necessarily a Republican, and I personally see him more right-leaning than President Trump on some issues, but he's also more left-leaning on social issues. So if we had a possible matchup between these two, things could definitely get interesting, to say the least. Um, Gary Johnson at one point peaked at 14% in polling on a national standpoint, and then he went all the way down to 3% on election day. But that's probably because he didn't get into the debates, or it's just because he was not that good of a candidate. Either way, this is going to be a completely different matchup because there are no Democrats running. So personally, I do think Gary Johnson would be able to hold on to the Maine West Coast. I think he would be able to hold on to California, Oregon, Washington. I'm not going to touch just yet, but I do think it could be closer than expected. In New Mexico and Colorado, I easily see Gary Johnson taking this state against President Trump. I think his weed stance in Colorado will land him a victory there, and I think that his home state, New Mexico, would definitely go to him. He got a lot of the popular vote in New Mexico compared to other states, where it was like 1% to 3%. Here it was around 9%, I believe. A lot of safe Republican states we would no longer see being safe Republican. A lot of the Midwest would not vote for President Trump. Not a lot of the states would be a lot closer than they did voting for President Trump against Hillary Clinton. Some may flip, some may not. It all depends. See, I've only filled in a couple states, and right now it's not super filled in yet. We have a teeny tiny total, so we can't really say anything. But I do think that President Trump would be able to win in states like Wyoming or states like Idaho, even though Evan McMillan had a surprising show up for his vote there in Idaho. I don't think Gary Johnson would do the same. However, in Utah, that's a different story. I do think Gary Johnson could make inroads in Utah, but I'm not going to go there just yet. In Alaska, I do think Gary Johnson would carry the state of Alaska. A lot of the Ted Cruz vote, unless it's a super solid red state, even though Alaska is technically super solid red, that was probably because Hillary Clinton was the nominee. It was a lot closer in past election years. And then we look to states like Oklahoma. You see, I don't really see that one flipping, even though it's a Cruz state. So we have the South that I'm not going to go to just yet. I think Gary Johnson could win Florida. If the Democrats did endorse him and they didn't run a candidate, there wouldn't be that much vote splitting. And I think Gary Johnson is a better alternative. Plus, if you add Hillary Clinton's total and Gary Johnson's total together, they essentially win the state. And that's counting in the turned off Bernie Sanders vote that I think some would come out for Gary Johnson, especially if there isn't like a Jill Stein running. This is just a potential one-on-one matchup. I do think they will come out for Gary Johnson. So in the Rust Belt, I do think that Gary Johnson would hold on to the Rust Belt. I think it'll be close, actually, so I'm not going to leave it in solid. Along with Florida, I think it'll be close. But overall, I think Gary Johnson could easily carry these states up here. In New York, I think Gary Johnson would carry that state by double digits, along with New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware. All the safe blue states, I definitely could see being still safe blue. I don't think that Donald Trump would be able to flip the states there. But in Maine, I personally, even though it is a Ted Cruz state, Donald Trump did extraordinary for a Republican in Maine in 2016. So that's something we can't touch just yet. West Virginia would be safe red. Kentucky would be safe red. Tennessee would be safe red. Arkansas would be safe red. Missouri would probably lean red. I'll probably update that. Actually, I'll just keep it as safe red because I don't have that much time to talk about it. In Illinois, I think that one would go to Gary Johnson. In Indiana, I still think Donald Trump would hold on to it, but I do think it could be narrow. But since it is Mike Pence's home state, I'm actually going to factor in Mike Pence this time. Usually I wouldn't do that, but I'll factor in Mike Pence this time and give it to Donald Trump. In Ohio, that's a tough call. I think Donald Trump would narrowly edge out Ohio, and if he wins Ohio, he will win Iowa. I think you can narrowly edge out both of these states, but I do think it'll be close. In Minnesota, I think Gary Johnson would easily win that state. There's a huge Rubio coalition there, and if Donald Trump was the nominee again, I think that Gary Johnson would do better than Hillary Clinton did and win the state by over 5%. In North Dakota, I'm going to give that one to President Trump, along with South Dakota. Nebraska, I don't really see Johnson making that many inroads there. Kansas, same thing. Montana, same thing. In Utah, I think Donald Trump would narrowly win there. I do not think it'll be. I do think it'll be close. I don't think it'll be a blowout because I do think Gary Johnson can appeal to a lot of the Evan McMullin voters and bring over a lot of his voters from 2016 and a lot of the Democratic vote because there is no Democratic candidate. And actually, I'm going to leave that one as a toss-up because I do think there's a possible way for Gary Johnson to win there. I think he'll narrowly hold on to Washington and Oregon. I think Washington and Oregon will probably be more than 5%, but I do think it'll be a narrow victory for him. Texas, 38 electoral votes. That one I'm conflicted on because Ted Cruz did win the state overwhelmingly in the primary, but then we have to realize that You see, I'm thinking through this as I make these predictions because I'm trying to see where these voter bases would go. Ted Cruz won a huge chunk of the Republican vote, but then again, they did come out to vote for President Trump, but he lost about 9% from Mitt Romney to where he won in 2016. He won the state of Iowa more than he won the state of Texas, and Iowa voted for Obama by around the same, I think 6% in 2008, or was that 2012? I'm not entirely sure, but that used to be a purple state, now it's leaning red because of President Trump. But if Iowa votes for Trump more than Texas did, that's something they need to worry about. He lost a lot of voters with the Ted Cruz vote. And, Gary Johnson, he's extremely inexperienced, but if the Democrats don't run a candidate, oh my gosh, this is going to be probably one of my most hated calls in a lot of my prediction videos. Yeah, I think that Gary Johnson would carry the state of Texas narrowly, being completely honest. I mean, if we look at the numbers where it was in 2016, even though Hillary Clinton was a losing candidate, could you imagine if they nominated someone who could appeal to more Latino voters? And could you imagine if the Democrats were able to actually make Texas competitive? When Texas was in 3% in polling, the Democrats did nothing to try to flip the state. And they still took down Donald Trump's lead from 16% for Mitt Romney to, I think, 8% for him, or 9%. So maybe it was a deficit around. That's still a huge deficit between the two. Being completely honest, I think that Texas is going to start trending more Democratic in future elections, especially if the Republican Party holds on to this Donald Trump platform, because I don't think it's really appealing to a lot of the conservatives, like in the states of Georgia, Arizona, Texas. States with growing minority populations and turned off conservative voters spells out Democratic victory 100%. But it's not safe for anything. And since Gary Johnson is a libertarian, I think that he'll be able to pick up his voters, a lot of the Clinton voters, and turned off conservatives, and I think it's enough to actually win him the state. In Mississippi, there's no competition. Donald Trump easily would win that state, along with Alabama, South Carolina. North Carolina, I'm not going to touch this yet, but I do think Trump would narrowly edge out a victory in North Carolina, because if you do add Clinton's totals and Gary Johnson's totals, I'm pretty sure that she still wouldn't win the state. But I do think Donald Trump would be able to narrowly edge out those voters because they weren't as turned off as other voters were in other states. In Georgia, I mean, I think Georgia could flip. The reasoning behind that is Georgia has a lot of turned off conservative voters, and personally, based on his approval rating there now, and where Gary Johnson would add on to voters, adding his voters, the Bernie Sanders supporters, and the Hillary Clinton supporters, I personally see that him winning that state. Virginia, I think that one would be safe for Gary Johnson. In Maine, I think President Trump would narrowly edge out a victory there. I don't think Gary Johnson is the type of guy to appeal to the Northeast, but I do think he would carry the state of New Hampshire narrowly. But I do think President Trump would be able to make inroads in Maine and make it competitive. He didn't do a lot of campaigning in Maine in 2016, and he should have if he wanted to win the state. He could have won the state. I can't really edit the first congressional district, which I think would go to Gary Johnson, but overall the state at large would go to President Trump. Utah. I'll come back to that one. Pennsylvania, I think, could go to Gary Johnson if you add on Gary Johnson's numbers and the Democratic vote, that because there is no Democratic candidate, you would add it into Gary Johnson's totals, and the turned off Bernie Sanders supporters. Honestly, I do think that one could be a Gary Johnson victory. Arizona, I also think, would flip. There's a lot of turned off conservatives here in Arizona, and it's not going to be good for the president, especially since there is a mild conservative running, more of a moderate libertarian, I guess. He's not really a libertarian, but he ran under the party anyway. So I think he could carry that state. Along with Nevada, if Arizona goes, Nevada goes as well. I do think that Gary Johnson will be able to take the state of Nevada. As for Utah, I called that one for Trump, and then I took it back. You know, there's a lot of angry conservatives there that Donald Trump is the nominee. His approval rating's not that good for an incumbent Republican president. And Gary Johnson's weed stances, you know, that helps him in Colorado, but how much does it help him in strongly conservative Utah? The effects are really unknown because this matchup would never happen. But you know, I think that Gary Johnson could flip the state of Utah narrowly, and I think that currently puts him at 371. So Hawaii hasn't been called. That one would be safe blue, but DC would also be safe Gary Johnson, I guess. And overall, these states, the final electoral map is 378 for Gary Johnson to 160 for President Trump. If you're just skipping to the end of the video, just hear me out real quick. Add the Bernie Sanders turned off vote because there is no Democratic nominee or Green Party nominee. Goes to Gary Johnson. The Hillary Clinton supporters go to Gary Johnson, and a lot of the independent vote and the libertarian vote goes to Gary Johnson. So thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you tomorrow.